What if your baby's only protector was a retired canine dog? And what if that dog kept barking at your nursery wall until the day you tore it down and uncovered a horrifying secret that had been hiding for years? In this gripping true story from Heroes for Animals, we follow Rex, a retired canine German shepherd who formed an unbreakable bond with a newborn. When strange things started happening in the baby's room, Rex's instincts kicked in. What he uncovered behind that nursery wall didn't just protect the child. It revealed a terrifying chapter of the house's past that no one was prepared for. If you believe in loyalty, instinct, and the incredible bond between dogs and humans, don't miss this unforgettable journey. This is The Canine Who Protected the Baby's Crib, and what he found inside the wall shocked everyone. The Wilsons had just moved into their dream home, a charming, century-old farmhouse tucked at the edge of a quiet Midwestern town. With its white wooden porch, creaking floors, and rose bushes out front, it looked like something out of a postcard. But to Rex, the retired canine dog lying on the porch, something didn't feel right. Rex had served in the force for nearly 8 years, trained to sniff out narcotics and track missing persons. He was a legend in his unit. When Officer Jamie Wilson, now a first-time mother, adopted him upon his retirement, she never thought he'd have to use his instincts again. That changed the moment baby Ellie arrived. The first few days were filled with joy. Rex was unusually gentle around the infant, often sitting beside her crib as if standing guard. But by the end of the first week, his behavior changed. It started with low growls, soft, persistent rumbles that echoed in the stillness of the nursery. He would sit rigid by one corner of the wall, his eyes locked on it like he was watching something move. Jamie thought it was just adjustment stress. Maybe Rex was feeling protective. But when he refused to leave the baby's room one night, snarling, hair raised, teeth exposed, her instincts as both a mother and a former officer kicked in. Something was wrong. That same night, the baby monitor glitched. A sharp static sound pierced through the house, waking Jamie from her light sleep. When she looked at the screen, she saw Rex standing between the crib and that same corner, growling. Then came the thump, a loud, muffled knock, not from the window or the floor, but from inside the wall. Jamie froze. She rushed into the nursery. Rex was tense, staring at the wall like it had a heartbeat. Ellie, thankfully, was still sleeping, but the air in the room felt heavy, stale, wrong. Jamie leaned in, pressing her ear against the wallpaper. Another thump, then scratching, and then silence. Her breath caught in her throat. Was it an animal? A rat? A raccoon? But Rex didn't behave this way with animals. He'd tracked men across state lines. This wasn't fear. This was warning. The next morning, Jamie moved Ellie's crib out of the room. She called her brother-in-law, a contractor, to inspect the wall. Probably just a bad beam or something settling. He shrugged. But when he tapped the wall, his face changed. Jamie, he whispered, this part's not in the blueprints. She stared. What do you mean? There's a gap back here. Hollow. About 6 feet tall. Like a sealed chamber. Rex stood beside them, tail low, ears sharp. He barked once. Loud, piercing. It was time to tear it open. The decision was made in silence. Jamie stood with her arms crossed, watching her brother-in-law, Nate, run his hands along the nursery wall. Rex sat beside her, his body rigid, eyes unblinking, locked on the spot they had all heard the noise from the night before. You sure about this? Nate asked, his voice low. Jamie didn't hesitate. Break it open. With a few powerful strikes of his sledgehammer, the dry wall crumbled. Dust filled the air. The first hole revealed nothing, just darkness beyond. Nate widened the opening, cautiously peeling back layers of old insulation and crumbling plaster until a small space emerged. It was a narrow chamber, about 2 feet wide, 6 feet tall, wedged between the walls like it was never meant to be found. Jamie shined a flashlight inside. The beam hit something that made her recoil. At first glance, it looked like tattered fabric, old sheets or blankets maybe. But as she focused, the shape became more distinct. There was a wooden rocking chair, a faded, threadbare stuffed rabbit, and on the floor, a pile of dusty children's books, their covers yellowed with time. It was a nursery, a secret nursery. Rex let out a low growl that vibrated through the room. He didn't bark, not yet. But the sound made Jamie's blood run cold. Nate leaned in further. Why would anyone hide this? Jamie scanned the items again. Everything looked untouched for decades. Frozen in time. There were no light fixtures. No windows. Just this eerie, hidden space, sealed behind the wall of a baby's room. The very thought of it made her skin crawl. Then she noticed something else. Scratches. Deep, jagged gouges on the inside of the wooden frame, as if something had clawed from the inside. Jamie moved closer, holding her breath. The scratches weren't random. They were in clusters, low to the floor, about the height of a child. "Oh my God," she whispered. Nate saw them too. "Do you think a kid was kept in here?" Jamie didn't answer. Her heart was pounding too loudly to think. She'd seen a lot during her years on the force, but nothing like this. Nothing this personal. Nothing this close to her own child. Rex inched forward, his nose sniffing the opening. He growled again, deeper this time. Then suddenly, he shoved his snout into the gap, barking furiously. Jamie jumped. Nate dropped his flashlight. Something inside moved. There was a rustle, then a clink, metal on wood. Jamie reached in and carefully pulled something out. A small metal box, rusted on the corners and covered in a thin layer of dust. It had no lock, just a latch that clicked open with a creak. Inside were photographs, black and white, some folded, others torn, and beneath the photos, a child's bracelet. It was pink, plastic. The name, Lila, was written in fading beads. Jamie's hand trembled. This wasn't just an old nursery. This was someone's prison. Suddenly, Nate cursed. "Jamie, look at this." He had pulled a yellowed envelope from behind one of the beams. Inside were documents, birth records, old medical notes, and one official-looking paper stamped with a state seal. It was a missing child report. From 1987. Lila Hartley, age 3, last seen in this town. Case never solved. Jamie stumbled back, trying to process what she was seeing. This can't be real. But Rex stood firm. He looked up at her with those dark, loyal eyes and barked once. A sharp, definitive bark, as if to say, "I told you." Jamie couldn't sleep that night. She sat at the kitchen table with the documents spread before her like puzzle pieces. The name, Lila Hartley, echoing in her mind. The child's bracelet was still clutched in her hand. The plastic beads strangely warm. Rex lay at her feet, watching her every move. "Why that wall, Rex?" she murmured. "Why now?" The clock ticked past 2 a.m. Nate had gone home. Shaken but determined to help her follow up in the morning. Jamie, though, couldn't wait. She opened her old laptop. Connected to the police database, her credentials as a retired officer still valid, and began her search. Lila Hartley, missing, 1987. Last seen at 11 Sycamore Lane. Jamie froze. That was this house. Her house. The report stated Lila had lived here with her mother, Evelyn Hartley, a quiet woman who had reportedly left town days after Lila vanished. There were no charges filed. No foul play confirmed. Just a dead-end file and a mother who had disappeared without a trace. Jamie's blood ran cold. No wonder the nursery looked untouched. No wonder no one ever talked about this house's history. The town had buried it. The way someone had buried that secret room behind the wall. She kept digging. There were whispers in archived newspapers. Neighbors had claimed they'd heard crying late at night. One old headline read, "Local toddler disappears without a trace. Mother blames kidnapping." But there was no evidence. No break-in. No ransom note. Just silence. Until now. Jamie looked down at Rex. He hadn't taken his eyes off her the entire time. "You knew," she said quietly. "You felt it. Somehow. You knew she was still here." Rex thumped his tail softly against the floor. By morning, Jamie had made her decision. She called the station where she used to work, spoke to her old partner, Detective Sandra Wu, and explained everything, well, almost everything. She left out Rex's instincts. Left out the bark that led them to the wall. Not everyone would understand, but she told Sandra about the hidden room, the bracelet, the documents, the photographs, and the address. By noon, a forensic team arrived. They cordoned off the nursery, took samples, photographed everything. Jamie stood outside the doorway with Rex beside her, watching them work. Then Sandra approached. "You weren't exaggerating," she said, holding up the box. This could reopen a cold case." Jamie nodded. Do you think it was the mother? Sandra hesitated. We don't know yet, but she vanished too. Remember? No activity. No sightings. Nothing. That's unusual. Jamie looked back at the now exposed cavity in the wall. So either she ran, or someone made her disappear too. Sandra glanced at Rex, who let out a low, warning growl. Jamie raised an eyebrow. That means something to you, boy? But Rex didn't move. He just stared out the window. Body tense. Jamie followed his gaze. Across the street, an old man stood at the edge of the sidewalk, watching the house. He was tall, hunched, with a cane and thick glasses. When he noticed Jamie looking, he turned and shuffled away. Hey, did you see him? Jamie pointed. That guy. He's been walking by a few times since we moved in. Sandra frowned. Neighbor? I don't know. He doesn't live on this street. I've asked. Rex let out another growl. Louder this time. Jamie's heart skipped. Was this connected? She reached for her phone. I'm going to get the security footage from our doorbell camera. I want to see if he's been watching longer than we thought. Sandra nodded. Do it. And Jamie. What? Be careful. Whatever happened in this house, it wasn't just forgotten. Someone made sure it stayed buried. Jamie looked down at Rex. And he just unearthed it. That evening, the house felt different. The nursery was now sealed with yellow crime scene tape. And Jamie had temporarily moved baby Ellie's crib into her own bedroom. But even with her daughter safe and the police now involved, a heaviness lingered, a presence. Like the house itself had awakened from a long, haunted sleep. And Rex wouldn't rest. All day, he had stayed near the front windows, eyes glued to the street. Every time a car passed or a figure moved in the distance, his ears perked, body alert. Jamie tried to distract him with food, toys, even a walk, but he wouldn't budge. Around sunset, Jamie finally checked the security footage. She scrolled through hours of clips, most of them unremarkable. Birds, deliveries, the occasional jogger. Then, at 2:11 a.m., the night before they opened the wall, she saw it. The same man, standing perfectly still at the edge of her lawn, just beyond the camera's range of clarity. His figure hunched, a fedora pulled low over his face. He didn't move, didn't approach, just watched. For 23 minutes. Then, as if satisfied, he turned and vanished into the darkness. Jamie's blood ran cold. She called Detective Sandra immediately. I just sent you a clip. Jamie said. Tell me this isn't a coincidence. Sandra's voice was tense. He's watching, and he probably knows what we found. I'll put a unit on patrol near your house tonight. But keep your doors locked. Jamie, don't take any chances. Jamie hung up and turned to Rex. He knew, she whispered. He knew what was behind that wall, and he's been making sure no one ever found it. Rex growled again, not at Jamie, at the front door. She turned slowly. Nothing was there, but Rex smelled something. He ran to the door and began pawing it, not frantically, but with purpose. His nose pressed along the seams, tracing the floorboards, sniffing down the cracks. Jamie opened it cautiously. The porch was empty, but Rex leapt down the steps and turned right, heading toward the flower bed that wrapped around the house. His body moved with intense focus, like he was tracking. Jamie followed, flashlight in hand. That's when she saw it. Footprints. Deep, fresh prints in the soft earth, the size of a man's boots. They trailed along the flower bed, right under Ellie's nursery window. They weren't there the night before. She knelt down, heart pounding. Whoever stood there had been watching through the glass. Had they known the room was being torn apart? Had they come to see if their secret was still safe? Or had they come to stop her? Rex growled low, sniffing the air. He was on edge now, ears flat, tail stiff. Jamie turned to go back inside, and then she saw it. Etched faintly into the wooden siding beside the nursery window, almost invisible unless you were inches away, was a carved word. Liar. It was fresh, scratched into the wood like someone had used a knife or a nail. Jagged, angry. Jamie stumbled back. This wasn't just someone trying to hide a past. This was personal. Back inside, she double-checked every lock, every window. She carried Ellie into her bedroom, heart racing, and curled up beside her crib, shotgun on the nightstand, Rex guarding the door. That night, the wind howled against the house. But it wasn't the storm that kept Jamie awake. It was the knowledge that somewhere nearby, the man in the hat was watching. And he wasn't done. The next morning, Jamie didn't wait for the police. She needed answers, not just reports or patrols. She needed someone who had lived in this town long enough to remember Evelyn Hartley and the little girl named Lila. So she went to the only place she could think of, the town library. She brought Rex with her. Normally, dogs weren't allowed inside, but Jamie's reputation as a former officer, and Rex's presence in an ongoing investigation, earned them special leniency. The librarian, a soft-spoken woman named Teresa, led Jamie to a narrow reading room in the back, away from the patrons. "I'm looking for anything on Evelyn Hartley," Jamie said. She lived at 11 Sycamore Lane back in the 80s. Her daughter Lila went missing in '87. Teresa's expression changed. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Wait here," she whispered. 10 minutes later, she returned with a worn, leather-bound scrapbook. "Most folks don't ask about the Hartleys anymore," she said, "but I remember them. Everyone my age does." Jamie opened the first page. There was a newspaper clipping, an engagement photo of Evelyn Hartley and a man named Walter Green. He was the janitor at the local school. Teresa explained. "Quiet man, strange, though, always wore the same hat. Always limping with a cane." Jamie froze. "A cane?" she asked, her voice tightening. Teresa nodded. "Yes, war injury, I think. You'd still see him wandering near the school years after retirement." Evelyn was his niece. He took her in after her parents died. She was just a teenager then. Had Lila when she was barely out of high school. Jamie turned the pages. More clippings. More shadows of a forgotten life. Then she saw a photo of the house, her house, dated 1983. And standing on the porch, half in shadow, was a tall man with a cane and a wide-brimmed hat. Her stomach twisted. It was him. Jamie looked up. What happened to him? Teresa lowered her voice. After Lila disappeared, Walter claimed someone had taken her. Said he saw a car speeding off that night. But police never found evidence of a break-in. And Evelyn? She left town days later, or so they said. Or someone made her leave. Jamie muttered. Teresa closed the book. There were rumors that Walter was controlling. That Evelyn tried to leave. And something happened, but no one proved anything. And eventually, people just stopped asking. Jamie sat back, her mind racing. The man in the hat, Walter, he had been watching her house. He had carved lyre into her siding. He'd stood under Ellie's window. He had something to hide. Rex suddenly stood up, ears perked, gaze locked on the window of the reading room. "What is it, boy?" Jamie asked. She moved to the window and peeked through the blinds. Across the street, standing near a rusted bench, was a tall man in a dark coat and hat. He was watching the library. Jamie's pulse quickened. She pulled out her phone and zoomed in. It was him. And this time, he didn't move when she stared back. He simply lifted one hand, 2 fingers to the brim of his hat, and tipped it in her direction. Then he turned and walked slowly down the sidewalk. Rex barked sharply. Teresa gasped. "Is that?" "Yeah," Jamie whispered, eyes locked on the fading figure. "I think he just followed me here." That night, back home, Jamie couldn't stop replaying what she'd learned. If Walter had something to do with Lila's disappearance, then what was behind the wall was only part of the truth. And he wasn't finished. Whatever secret had been buried in her home for 38 years. Walter Green was willing to do anything to keep it there that night. Jamie didn't sleep. She sat in the living room with Rex at her side, shotgun across her lap, the baby monitor on the table glowing faint green. Every creak in the floor, every gust of wind outside twisted her gut tighter. But Walter Green never showed up. Not that night. But Jamie knew he would. She had spent the day gathering everything she could, documents, news archives, even an old blueprint of the house, which she requested from the town's zoning office. It was a crinkled, yellowed map of the original design, but as she ran her finger over it, something didn't match. There was a room missing. Or more precisely, a stairwell. She compared it with her actual floor plan. The basement had a single entry through the kitchen. A cold cement space with old shelves and boxes. But the blueprint showed a second stairwell, tucked beneath the living room floor. It was small, sealed off with no clear access. She felt a chill down her spine. "Rex," she whispered, "do you think there's more?" Rex tilted his head, then stood up, walked slowly to the corner of the living room rug, and pawed at it. Jamie's eyes widened. She helped him pull it back. Underneath, Nearly invisible beneath the worn floorboards was a faint seam, a rectangular outline, perfectly cut, a hatch. She fetched a crowbar from the garage. The old wood groaned as she pried it up, dust swirling into the air. A rush of cold air rose from beneath, heavy and damp, like something had been trapped down there for decades. She clicked on her flashlight. Rex descended first, slow, careful, but without hesitation. Jamie followed. The stairwell was narrow, made of unfinished stone and old timber. Cobwebs brushed her arms. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became. And then, they reached the bottom. It was a room. Not a storage room, not a shelter. A prison. Jamie's flashlight revealed rusted chains bolted to the stone wall. An old mattress, rotting and sunken. Scratches on the concrete, deep, desperate. And on the far wall, smeared in something dark and faded. A message. She cried. He didn't stop. Jamie staggered backward, her throat dry, her breath caught in her lungs. Rex began barking, sharp, insistent barks that echoed off the stone. Jamie turned her light toward the far corner. There was something under a sheet. She approached, heart thudding so loud it drowned out the barking. She pulled it back. It was a trunk, old, iron-bound, sealed with a lock long rusted through. She knelt and lifted the lid. Inside were bones. Small, fragile, human. Alongside them, a decayed teddy bear and a pink sweater. Shriveled by time, she collapsed to her knees, covering her mouth, fighting back the wave of nausea and grief. Rex whined softly and pressed his head against her arm. This was it. This was Lila. She was never taken. She was never lost. She had died in this house. Alone. Forgotten. Jamie stumbled up the stairs. Dialed Sandra with shaking hands. You need to get here. We found her. We found her. The words echoed in her own ears. But as she climbed into the living room, she stopped cold. Her front door was open. And on the doormat sat a small object. A stuffed rabbit, old, gray, and covered in dust. Jamie's knees buckled. He had been there. Walter Green had been in her home, while she was beneath it. And he had left her a message. Jamie locked the front door with trembling hands, heart pounding like a drum in her chest. The stuffed rabbit still sat on the doormat. She stared at it, that tattered toy that once belonged to a child who never had a chance, and then picked it up gently, holding it like a fragile piece of the past. Its button eyes stared blankly back at her. He had been inside, while she was underground, while Rex barked in warning, while Ellie slept in the next room. She turned to Rex. He's not hiding anymore, she whispered. He's taunting us. Rex growled low, pacing by the window, gaze locked on the shadows outside. His body was tense, hackles raised, every sense on high alert. He knew danger was close. Jamie called Sandra. She was in the basement. Jamie said, barely able to keep her voice steady. There are remains. It's Lila. And, he came back. He was in my house. We're on our way. Sandra replied. Do not leave. Do not open that door again. But Jamie didn't feel safe just waiting. She checked every room, every closet, even the attic, nothing. She brought Ellie into the living room, kept her close, and sat with her shotgun across her lap while Rex stood guard at the door. The night crawled by like a ghost. Then, at 3:47 a.m., Rex barked. Once, Jamie snapped awake. Rex stood at the front window, ears pointed, body still as stone. Jamie followed his gaze, and her breath caught in her throat. Walter was standing in the yard. His figure was backlit by the moon, tall and skeletal, cane in one hand, that same wide-brimmed hat casting his face in shadow. He didn't move. He didn't flinch. He just stood there, watching. Jamie stepped outside, shotgun lowered but ready. Stay where you are, she shouted. Walter didn't respond. I know what you did, she said, voice shaking with rage. We found her. Silence. Then, slowly, he raised his head, and for the first time, Jamie saw his face. Pale, wrinkled, but his eyes were alive. Cold, empty, soulless. You should have left the wall closed, he said, voice brittle as bone. Jamie held her ground. You killed a child. His lips twitched. No, I saved her. From Evelyn. She was going to run. Leave town. Take Lila. She would have ended up in a ditch somewhere. Or worse. But I kept her safe. Right here. Jamie felt her knees weaken. You locked her in a wall. You let her die. Walter tilted his head. She cried at first, but she got quiet. Eventually, Rex let out a snarl so deep it vibrated through the air. Walter turned to him. Still loyal, aren't you, Mutt? Just like the others. Jamie had heard enough. Police are on the way, she said. You're done running. Walter laughed. A rasping, sickening sound. Am I running? He whispered, stepping forward. And then, with shocking speed for a man his age, he raised his cane, not a cane at all, but a hollowed pipe, and aimed it like a weapon. Jamie fired. The blast from the shotgun shattered the silence. Walter stumbled back, the makeshift weapon falling from his hand. He collapsed to the ground, gasping, blood blooming across his shoulder. Rex stood over him, teeth bared, snarling. Sirens wailed in the distance. Walter coughed, spitting blood. You should have left it buried. Jamie looked down at him with steel in her eyes. No, Lila deserved better. And now, everyone will know. Sandra's cruiser pulled up moments later. Lights flashing red and blue into the night. Officers rushed forward, securing the scene. Jamie picked up Ellie, who had started to stir. She held her close, breathing in the scent of her child, grounding herself in the only thing that mattered now, protecting the innocent. And at her feet, Rex stood tall, the silent sentinel who had never once backed down. 3 days after Walter Green was taken into custody, the story was everywhere. Remains of missing child found behind wall in historic Sycamore home. Retired K9 dog leads police to solve 38-year-old cold case. Jamie sat in the now cleared nursery. The wallpaper stripped away, the wall torn down to its studs. Where once there had been silence, now there were flowers, candles, and photos of a little girl named Lila Hartley. She hadn't been forgotten, not anymore. Sandra stood beside her, arms crossed, looking down at the small memorial. We confirmed it with DNA. It's her, she said softly, and the story he told you, part of it was true. Evelyn did try to leave, but he didn't let her. We think she's buried somewhere out near the state forest. We're still searching. Jamie nodded, her jaw tight. She tried to save her daughter. And he killed them both. Sandra placed a hand on her shoulder. You saved Ellie, and you gave Lila justice. Jamie looked down at Rex, who was lying quietly beside the crib. He did, she said. He never stopped protecting her. The town came together in the days that followed. A memorial service was held at the park for Lila, flowers, prayers, and apologies whispered into the wind. Some remembered her, most had forgotten, but no one could ignore her now. Jamie spoke at the gathering. She was a child who never got to grow up, who cried in the dark while the world moved on. But thanks to one dog's instincts, and his refusal to ignore what others did, her voice was finally heard. When she stepped down from the podium, the crowd applauded, but the loudest cheers were for Rex. He stood beside her, proud, wearing a new collar donated by the department. A medal hung from it, for unwavering loyalty and courage in the line of duty. A local journalist called him, the hero who barked at a ghost. Jamie just called him family. Weeks passed. The house was quiet again. Not haunted, not heavy, just quiet, like it had exhaled after holding its breath for decades. Jamie had the basement sealed and the nursery rebuilt. But she left one section of the wall exposed, the place where Lila had been hidden. In its place, she framed a photo of her, found among the box of belongings, a smiling girl in overalls, holding a balloon. Every night, Jamie lit a candle beside it, not in mourning, in remembrance. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Ellie crawled toward the photo. She couldn't speak yet, but she pressed her tiny fingers against the frame and giggled softly. Rex came up beside her and nuzzled her hand. Jamie watched from the doorway, eyes misting. Maybe, she whispered, Lila's still watching, and maybe, she knows she's safe now. Rex turned toward her and gave a soft bark. Jamie smiled. Yeah, you know she is. What started with a dog's growl turned into a journey of justice, healing, and truth. Rex didn't just protect a baby, he uncovered a forgotten child's silent cry, and brought light to the darkest corner of a home. If this story moved you, subscribe to Heroes for Animals, where we honor the silent heroes with 4 legs and endless heart. Leave a comment below, and tell us, do you believe dogs truly know what we cannot see?